Hello and welcome to Tar Heel Teachers at Home. I'm Marlo Artist. I'm the moderator of the program. Tar Heel Teachers at Home is an interview series focused on engaging North Carolinians in conversations around education. Each week, I'm happily joined by a wonderful panel of educators, each one representing a particular subsection of education. We'll start our introductions with our elementary school co-host.
Hi, I'm Amy Tarr. I teach fourth grade ELA and social studies for Clinton City Schools. I'm in my 8th year of education, and you can follow me on Twitter at Cards for Scholars.
Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Tempest Leake. I'm currently the assistant principal at East Union Middle School, which is in Union County. I've been in education for 14 years, and you can follow me at the Tempest07 on Twitter.
Awesome. Glad to have you here,
Hi,
Dr.
I'm
Leake.
Ashley. Hi, I'm Ashley Bandy, and I am a math teacher for Newton Conover City Schools in Catawba County. I have been teaching for 7 years, and I have just won the honor of Boroughs Welcome Fund Northwest Region Teacher of the Year. And you can find me on Twitter at Miss_Bandy.
Congratulations, and thank you so much for joining us, Ashley.
Thank you.
Dr. Lionel Kato. I'm currently the Chief Officer for Learner Supports in Winston-Salem, Forsyth County Schools. I've been in education for over 20 years and worked in different regions of the state. My current work leads me to work with SEL needs of our students and staff, strengthen behavioral intervention frameworks, and facilitating the development of our new student code of character, conduct, and support. I'm very honored to be a part of this 125th episode.
Thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Kato. We appreciate you being here, and we're so excited that this is episode 125 of Tar Heel Teachers at Home. For this episode of Tar Heel Teachers at Home, we are chatting with Senator Gladys Robinson from North Carolina Senate District 28. She's here to discuss a variety of education topics as we continue to unpack the budget, discuss Leandro, and more. Senator Robinson, Happy New Year, and thank you so much for joining us here on Tar Heel Teachers at Home.
Well, it's wonderful to be with you, and Happy New Year to everyone.
We're so glad to have you here. Thank you so much for joining us. So last year, you and your colleagues in the Senate and in the General Assembly discussed so many educational issues. When you think about 2021, what were some of the victories as it relates to education?
Well, that's a hard question. I'm an education advocate, and I really believe that we should fully fund education. So I suppose that some people may feel that getting the budget passed with some kind of raise was a victory. To me, it fell far short of what we should be doing in education. Education is the largest percentage of our state budget. And really, we ought to be dedicating critical mass of the funds to that. So I felt certainly we should have been doing 5% salary increase each year, not over the biennium. And that we should have fully funded Leandro. So I feel that those were not victories. And did a disservice to our children. I suppose some of the other things we did put some money into low wealth schools. If you look at the budget, there was some money in there. There were parts of Leandro that were funded that will help. I believe we funded in the budget about I'm told by staff is 73% of the governor's request for 21-22 and 57% of 22-23. So it will start some things to get it done in terms of some of the support, some of the teacher assistance for some of the low wealth schools, psychologists, some funds for children with disabilities, et cetera, some of those critical pieces. But it does not do justice in terms of where we need to be. Just to get people to understand, when Terry Sanford was governor in 1961, North Carolina was 39th in education in the country. We're now 39th again. So that doesn't say very much for us. We have not, we've gotten better, but we've gotten worse. And so I am very disappointed that we're not doing a better job in the General Assembly of really funding education, because these students are the future of North Carolina. You know, they are the economic growth or the lack of economic growth, whether they have quality of life or not, is going to make a significant difference to our state. So I'm not pleased, you can tell, with what was done. We did do something. There were some salary increases there for principals, teachers, etc. Probably the greatest thing you can say we did was a $13 an hour for the non-certified school personnel for 21, 22, and 15 for the second part of the biennium. So that was a win in terms of getting that done, something I advocated for as well too. So there were minor pieces that we were able to get done, and some that will make a difference. However, I feel we could have done much better. We have a surplus in the budget right now. We've got $4.2 billion on the bottom line that is sitting in our reserve. So certainly we could have fully funded the requests for Leandro, and we could have done much better by our teachers, principals, assistants, etc.
It's always so much to do, and when you're an advocate like yourself, like you're saying, there's just so much that you think about that still needs to be done. You were very, very vocal in terms of your non-support of the budget. You did not vote in support of the budget. One of the reasons had to do with the LOF supplement. Guilford County did not receive any of those funds, despite teacher supplement being 12th in the state. Talk a little bit more about that, and is there any type of way that there could be some movement in the future with that, because Guilford County was included, and there were 4 other districts that weren't included as well.
Certainly. Well, and unfortunately, politics is targets, and that's not good. If you consider what we should be doing, we should have, actually given the supplements to all of them. If you're going to give it to some, give it to all of them. And, when Leandro started, it was about the haves and the have-nots. Some counties could, some could not. Now Wake and Mecklenburg and Durham could. Guilford County has not done that, whether it could or could not done. So we're low in terms of teacher supplements. And that means that our teachers will not have the salaries that are equivalent to the other counties. And that's not fair. It means we'll lose some teachers. They may go to Forsyth, they may go to Wake, etc. They won't just go to Virginia. They'll go to some of the counties close to us. So that will hurt Guilford County in terms of having good teachers, keeping our teachers here so that they can teach children. Now, the possibility, of course, is that maybe we can talk with county commissioners about increasing the supplement, and that will have to be a property tax. So it's up to the citizens whether they want to vote for that, and maybe they will. And I've suggested that, even talk with superintendent and some other people about that. So that's a possibility in terms of increasing the supplement on the local level. But it is really unfair, and I spoke about it being unfair to Guilford. It's unfair to the others too, but they will be at a higher salary level than we will in Guilford. So we'll have to continue to do something about it. There is in the biennial budget, there are some possibilities of making some adjustments, but the rules govern what you can and cannot do. So I'm not sure we can do anything in the short session or not.
Thank you so much for that, Senator Robinson. What questions do we have for the senator?
I don't want to piggyback on some of the comments that were just made, because I actually wanted to ask the question. North Carolina had been seen as a progressive Southern state for a long time when it came to public education. We committed to educate our disenfranchised populations and the poor. We kept a very competitive pay system and benefit system with a step system with the teachers, master's pay, longevity. We had great healthcare benefits, and we built a world-class community college system and a university system that's the envy of the country. And you've kind of already talked about where you see things headed in regards to public education, but more specifically with talking about teacher pay and benefits, do you see any chance of the step system or any of those items returning to the benefits package that we once had for teachers, longevity pay, master's pay, so on and so forth?
Well, and I can tell you've been around a while as you've watched where we've gone, and that's where I've been to watch how we've grown, and that we have been number one and at the top in terms of our higher education system, as well as what we've done in public schools. And we've watched that over years. I've watched it for a very long time. And I'm very proud of what we've done. So I want us to get back. And I think there are other people in the General Assembly who want to do the same thing. What is hurting us a lot is setting up a very competitive system with opportunity schools, funding privates as opposed to public. And that hurts because if we're using the same dollars, and our Constitution says that we must fund public education. That's what the Constitution says. And we have an obligation. It doesn't say anything about us funding private schools. So if people want to do that, they should find some money to do that. And I'm not against private schools. Some are great, but that's an opportunity that people need to pay for, find other funds, and not drain our public school systems. So my point is that if we can get more like-minded people to see and to understand that with the population in our school system, if you erode the public school system, what you're doing, and pull kids and put them in private schools, etc., what you've done is left public schools with minority and low wealth kids. And they deserve quality education like everybody else. But why in the world would we fund a private rich system and not as opposed to funding what our Constitution says? And that's what the education is about. So I think that we have to have more like-minded people making policy that sticks to the Constitution, funds public education, make sure that we do what Leandro says. And I was around when Judge Manning issued the first ruling. I was on the Closing Achievement Gap Commission with Senator Martin during that time. So the intent here is that we give equal opportunity. We provide the resources for all of our children, especially those who are low wealth, who are not achieving. And of course, minority children continue to stay at the lower level. We fund, we put nurses, whoever we need to put to help our teachers to get their academic growth up to where it should be. There's nothing wrong with the children's minds. Children, they can learn. We just have to do what we need to do. And teachers need the resources. So if we can put the funds where they need to go and build up our public school system and get folk who understand that education actually is the equalizer, and that if you don't educate the children we're talking about, then what you've done is put them at a much lower level and not equip them for the kind of life that they deserve to. So in terms of, you want to talk about teachers and equity and benefits, and that's a part of it. Now, we do have a good state benefit system. We really do. That's probably, in the top, but the salary hasn't kept up. So we've got to do that if we want to keep quality teachers. And quality teachers, quality principals are what will create the kind of equal education, the kind of great education that our kids need. I think it's a possibility that we get like-minded people. We've got an election year in, so we need to get some people in who think like you and I. And maybe some of you out there are interested, because we've got to have people who understand education and understand what it takes, as opposed to policymakers. We got policymakers who are chairing the Senate education committees now, who have no experience in public education, absolutely none in terms of what it takes to create a good public education system.
On the strand of getting people that are like-minded, I know that you've been in office for over 10 years now. Do you feel like that's getting worse or like it's getting better?
Well, I was extreme, when you come in new, even though I came from I really came out of the Board of Governors system, and it was bipartisan. But we worked together. So I was really floored to come to the General Assembly and find that there was no collaboration. So I was very disappointed, because I was all eager about what we could do for the system. I think we've gotten worse, but I think we've made some progress, in all fairness. We've made some progress. We haven't increased salaries like we should have, but they have been increased. Some teachers said to me, well, we're glad we got something. And then another teacher said, Senator Robinson, I'm glad you didn't vote for that, because teachers like me with 15 to 24 years of experience, we don't get anything. And I said, you're right. So, there are different ways of looking at it in terms of who's compensated, who's not, and what's fair. We made some progress. We have the funds to do better. So I think we've gotten a little better. I think, and in all fairness, I can be very tough about this, but in fairness to my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, I talk to them and try to get them to understand, because I think some of it is a lack of understanding. It's a lack of knowledge. Like I said to one, you need to go into public schools and you need to sit down and learn. Whereas one said they taught their children at home, homeschool. Well, that's all right, because you can afford it. Most of the kids we're talking about, the parents can't afford to sit home and teach them. So I think some of them are just ignorant about the real issues, and they need to be in classrooms. They need to be better acquainted and talk to teachers, talk to principals about what real issues are. Don't threaten them, but just talk to them about it. So we've made some progress. There are some there who I think will, without pressure, would do a better job.
Okay, so coming off of, what she was just mentioning, I know you're on the Education and Higher Education Committee. Do you guys have any kind of long-term talks or plans in place for what we can look to for the future? Because it seems like everything that we've gotten here is kind of like a Band-Aid, short-term, but long-term, what are we looking at as we continue? Because I'm getting ready to go into that 15 to 25 year stint where there is no pay increase, and that is going to be difficult to retain teachers.
Right, you're right. Well, we don't, as far as I know, we don't have anything. We've talked about it. We've talked about it in terms of the pay, in terms of steps and increasing what those steps are. We've also talked about it in terms of professional development, something we've talked about for a long time. You're at an administrative level, and that's great, but we also want to keep teachers in the classroom. but there's no incentive there. We, for a very long time, we talked about professional development so that there is an incentive for good teachers to stay in the classroom, to still get that salary increase, but also to have some growth in terms of some levels of what you can look forward to. You know, and those models are out there, and I'm sure you know about them as well too. So that is something that is being discussed now. There's a study, I believe that DPI has it. So you might inquire there, because I would hope that they would include some of you in terms of looking at that and making recommendations. The bad thing about policymakers, and of course I'm one of them, but sometimes we make those decisions and make policy without talking to the folk who really know, who are impacted. And so we need to talk to you about what is actually professional development for you. What would keep you a teacher that is under you? Some of you teachers on tonight, what is professional? What is growth? Rather than you moving to be an administrator, maybe you don't want to do that. But what would be the incentives for you to stay in the classroom and move to another level? I have seen some, and they are great. I just left I'm on the Southern Regional Education Board appointed by the governor, and I just left Atlanta with the Southern states, where they have implemented some models in terms of keeping great teachers in classrooms. So we need to be able to do that. But now in terms of the supplements between 15 and 24, I don't know of any in place that are being studied now. I know we've talked about it, that we have to have some. When I say we, I mean the Democrats. We've talked about it some, and we've mentioned it, but I don't know of any of those. I do know of some study going on regarding professional development. And let me just add that issues like that are those things that you need to send in to, as an organization, and as individuals, need to send in to the Senate Education Committee. Send it in to Senate and to House, because you can say it to me, but I'm only one individual. But if it goes into the whole committee from your organization, it makes an impact. You know, so the more you speak, then the louder your voice is, and the more you speak collectively as a group, the louder your voice is. So I'd encourage you to do that.
Thank you so much for being such an advocate for education and all that you do. You can tell that you're very passionate about it. So I'm glad that we have someone in the office to voice those things for us. One thing that I've heard mentioned a lot online between teachers is with the Omicron variant upping COVID numbers, what parameters do schools have by law to go virtual if needed? And what do you think needs to be done as far as education, keeping those children safe?
Well, that was very controversial these past 2 years, you might know, and the governor made decisions, well, as he should. My opinion is that the executive of the state, and based on how our Constitution is, he has that responsibility. There were people who didn't like that. Republicans didn't like that. So they've implemented a law now that says that the governor cannot make an executive order regarding viruses, et cetera, disasters, et cetera, without consulting with the Council of State. And his council, may or may not agree with him. So that may be a long process. So we know that just made it political. It didn't make it about the schools and what's best and what the secretary of DHHS says. It just made it political in terms of parties fighting. The LEAs do have, and I've got to remember if this changed or not, but the last I remember is that we gave LEAs the authority, within the parameters of the state to make decisions with their school boards. So that is something that your superintendent, along with your school board, should talk about with your health director to decide whether you close, whether you open, etc. And that's the last I remember. Now, if I'm wrong, I'll correct it later, but I do remember that that was the last decision we made. And it's probably best, because if you move from county to county, things do change. And you've got to look at, you know, what is the rate of infection? What everybody should have safety precautions in place. I know some folks won't make the kids wear masks, and it's hard to keep little children with masks on. I know that's hard, but all of as many safety precautions, the hand cleaning and spacing and all of that should be done everywhere. But I know that there are things that may differ from county to county, from LEA to LEA. It may be the best thing that decisions, but if it gets to be epidemic, then my opinion is that the governor has to make a decision if it gets to be an epidemic. We don't know what Omicron is. Even CDC doesn't know what Omicron is. They said a third one is coming, maybe a fourth one. So we don't know. We just know that we have to do the best we can. Besides being an educator, I'm a health professional, and it's very important that we protect the health of our children and of vulnerable people as well.
Well, and not only with COVID, school safety has also been a big issue with a lot of gun violence. So what can we do as a state to ensure that, we're taking more precautions as far as that?
Yeah. Well, I agree with you. And gun violence is very serious. One of the worst things we've done is not to require criminal background checks for people who want to buy guns. So as a group, you need to send in letters about that, because I don't care where you are, you ought to require that. That's why guns are everywhere. Everybody anybody who wants one can get it if you don't have to have a criminal background check. And that's where all of these high-powered machetes are coming from, whatever you call them. I don't know the proper names, but I know they kill a lot of people. So we need the criminal background checks. And then my concern, and what I had really wanted to happen, and we had a forum here in Guilford, is that we would fund facilities across the state. We have the money. If we had done the bond, we would have been able to give the money to every LEA so that they could build facilities that could have protections. The old buildings, there is no way for you to protect the entrances and the exits at all of these old school buildings. You don't even have the intercom systems to say something's going on from one building to the, so our buildings are in bad shape. And we had the opportunity with the bond to provide buildings for our schools and our systems, and we didn't do it. And that's failure on our part. That's terrible. So we need to have that so that you can have the kind of monitoring that you should have at these school systems to keep people out, because that's what will help, is if you're able to do detection when folks are walking in with weapons, and if you're able to keep them out. The other thing is, you've got sheriffs in these counties, but most of them are telling you that they are overworked. So it's very difficult for you to have police or sheriff protection, and then for you to fund resource officers as well too. So we have to do better. Now, there was some money in there for resource officers, etc., but there's back and forth about where you ought to have them, whether you ought to have them at middle school, whether you ought to have them at elementary, high school. Now, if the purpose is right, and the purpose is protection from the outsiders, we don't need them, to discipline kids. but protection from the outsiders, protection for against violence, etc. We need to have them there to protect our children and our teachers, etc. And, you know, on the other level, you have to continue to advocate for the right kind of gun laws. There is for every city in America, when President Obama was in office and President now Biden was on the task force to write up what each city should do in terms of gun laws. And Eric Holder was on. It's an excellent guide. It's an excellent guide to what we need to do in our cities and our counties and our rural areas about gun laws. But it wasn't adopted. And we're having a lot of difficulty now getting people to do that. But if we were to do that, it doesn't mean that we're taking people's rights away in terms of owning a gun. It means that we're protecting the rights of other people. You know, we're protecting the rights of citizens. You can use your gun to go shoot animals or whatever and go on the range, but you can't go in and kill a bunch of children, a bunch of people. You cannot do that. So we need to implement some policies, some laws and some policies to make sure that we're protecting our children. I can't tell you what to do. I am very concerned about our schools being open to folks walking in and hurting our children and our teachers. I'm very concerned about it. I have grandchildren who live outside of Atlanta. And I'm concerned every day. They're in a rural area. I'm concerned every day about, Lord have mercy, protect my grandchildren, protect everybody else's too, but protect my grandchildren, because society just is not kind right now. It's not kind.
Senator Robinson, I do want to ask a question before we shift over to our virtual audience. Just
Okay.
regarding master pay, what will it take for us to be able to reinstate master's pay?
Well, all it took was a vote. And we tried to, I mean, it doesn't make sense not to have it. It was in the House budget, not in the Senate. And when they compromised it out, is what they did. But it doesn't make sense because and I'm sure Dr. Kate, is that Kato? Kato remembers when master's pay was implemented. And part of that was, it was an incentive to get a master's. The pay would increase, you know, the skill set would increase, etc. So I don't understand why we need to go backwards rather than forward. You know, that's the incentive that teachers, and you need to constantly say at the NEA and every NCAE needs to say, you know, this was one of the incentives. We don't have very many, but this was one of the incentives that was put in place, that teachers get a master's, you increase your level of academic excellence, ability to perform, to understand, work with kids, and you get the pay increase. So we're going to continue to work on it. I pledge my support to continue to work on that. I think we will get it back. I think we will. We have enough people who are talking about it, who want it, to get it back. And but you need to say it also.
Mm-hmm. Yes, we're going to keep saying it. We do have a question from a member of our virtual audience. So, Jose, what's your question?
Hi, good evening again, ma'am. A while ago, you mentioned about protecting our children, right? And what about our children with special needs? Since I'm working in exceptional children, do you have any idea or plan or sitting with your colleagues protecting or keeping what's the best for our children with special needs?
Sure. Very good question, and thank you. There is in the budget, and it's a part of Leandro funding, an appropriation for children with disabilities, and so that is in there, and you should expect that coming up. But I think that is so very important because you know, when the law changed that we have children in classrooms, regular classrooms, etc., I think we forget that that takes additional personnel. It takes additional personnel. My beautician's daughter is an excellent special needs teacher and who did work training in another country as well to train them how to work with those kids. And she's very passionate about those children. And I understand that as well too. So I believe that we will continue to increase the funding there, and you need to advocate for that because it's something to deal with probably 10 children of a certain age in classes. But if you have 10 with special needs, you've really got your hands full in terms of trying to balance their needs and keep calm and make sure that they get the amount of learning. So I expect that to continue to increase. You've got great advocates who come to Raleigh to talk about that. And most people hear that. Most people seem to be able to understand and hear that we need to fund children with special needs. I just wish they would hear the rest of it. But I think that, you know, with your voice and other voices, I think we'll continue to fund that and to increase that area. You're welcome.
Great question, Jose. Other questions from the panel?
I was going to ask, have you guys discussed anything about holding schools accountable for like the accountability measures at the end of the year as far as testing goes? Because we have had, I know in my district, a very reasonable amount of students that have missed a lot of days, teachers that have missed a lot of days due to COVID, and that puts a lot of gaps in, you know, the instruction, the learning. So I just wanted to know if there's been any discussion about that at all.
Sure. And yes, there has. We anticipated that there would be gaps, closing schools, having virtual learning, et cetera. We anticipated that. And with so many of the systems closed and all of them being closed, unfortunately, we didn't anticipate the huge gap that it is, that the data is showing. And you know that for the past year, we did not require the accountability measures because you really couldn't do that. You know, there was no way to hold folks accountable, and they weren't in school to teach children, et cetera, all the children. But there's a subcommittee out of the Senate and House that worked on first what that gap is, and then also requested that DPI come back to us with recommendations in terms of how we're going to close that. What are the measures that need to be in place? What is the funding that it will take? But what are those things we need to do to make sure that we are closing that gap? One, you know, how many children were really, even when school opened back up, how many students were not back in school? We had a lot of absenteeisms, like you said. Some parents who said, I want to send my children back yet, you know. And we know, I think I had some great nieces who said, I don't want to send and I had to say, you need to send your children back to school. But everybody doesn't have a great aunt like that. So we know we had to get the data in terms of what's real absenteeism as compared to regular absenteeism before, you know. And then what do we do? Now, a couple of those things were the summer programs, and there's money for every LEA to offer summer school to kids who missed out as well as kids who didn't miss out. So that funding is there. We hope LEAs will take advantage and then go a step further and include churches and organizations in the communities who can come in and help. Schools can't do it by themselves. They've got to have help. So we hope that our LEAs will include the fraternal organizations and the churches and everybody else, faith organizations, wherever they are, that they'll come in, retired teachers, and help to work on specific summer programs to begin to work with those children to close the gaps. And then we've asked DPI to come back and tell us, what are those things that you plan or that you want us to fund, but what you plan to do every year in terms of closing these gaps. We know it'll take time, but there has to be specific plans. And you need to know what those plans are as well to the superintendent. State superintendent needs to share. She has not been sharing that. I know that she's given us a preliminary kind of report. She's working on some others as well, but I would expect that you as school leaders would have been involved in what you think will work. What will work in a rural area may not work in an urban area, and vice versa. You may have additional transportation issues. You may have all kinds of issues are there in terms of, you may need some incentives to get some of the kids into school. So I would hope that she would engage each of you in terms of recommendations, because this is a long-term problem and we've got to have a lot of help to get it done.
Who would you say would be the most important people for us as teachers to contact to have our voices heard?
I'd say the state superintendent first. Catherine Pruitt, is that right?
Truitt.
What's her name? Truitt. Truitt. I knew I had it wrong. Truitt. Truitt, Catherine, talk to her. And then beyond that, talk to her as well, but also send your recommendations as well to our Senate and House education committees. We want to know what you think. Send it to us. Okay.
Do we have time for one last question, Mr. Artis?
Yes, we do.
Okay, I wanted to hop in and kind of piggyback on some of the comments just previously made. Very important things, you discussed, Dr. Robinson. But, before COVID, we had some of the same issues. I think COVID just kind of made it more pronounced. We had disengaged youth, we had mental health concerns, attendance issues, we had violence issues. And so here recently, there are some members of the General Assembly that have taken aim at the High School Athletic Association over a number of issues. And there's a lot of energy being expended on indoctrination of children and attacking the K-12 curriculum and starting this statewide movement to, put unreasonable expectations on teachers regarding instruction. So these are like these peripheral issues. How do you feel about these issues, and how are you working with your colleagues to bring the focus back to the most vital issues that are actually affecting us day to day in our schools?
Well, and those are good questions that may take more time than you have. But if you've heard me on the floor, you've heard how I feel about some of them. I was involved to some extent with High School Athletic Association. And my feeling about that is that the General Assembly legislators were micromanaging and getting into business that is not our business. Now, certainly when it comes to some of the policy level things, we have to do that, and we delegate some of that to the State Board of Education. But the rest of that is not what we were elected to do. And people get confused about what they're in Raleigh to do. They come there with somebody they're mad at, somebody they didn't like, something that didn't fund their business, somebody who didn't treat their child, whatever they come with personal issues. And they come to make laws, and that's not what we're supposed to be doing. So that's kind of what happened with the High School Athletic Association. And I'm sure you know where that is now in terms of the Athletic Association agreeing that they'll work with State Board in terms of trying to develop a memorandum of agreement and we hope that works and keeps the association in place, because that's what people have said. They've said that hundreds and hundreds of them, thousands, leave the association alone. It should have policies that govern how it spends money, et cetera, et cetera. And they need to report that in that MOU with the state board. But in terms of the organization itself, it seemed to have worked for the majority of people. Now, when you come to these indoctrination, I had a whole speech on the floor about that. It drives me crazy. Because as I said on the floor, teachers are not teaching racism in general. Now you can always find some that are doing the wrong stuff, but you can find that those who are not teaching like they should too. And principals have to do a better job of, evaluating and seeing what's going on in those classrooms. But in terms of the whole critical race theory, all that foolishness going on, they should have heard Nicole Hannah Jones talk about that. They didn't listen to her. They didn't want her in North Carolina anyway. But they should have heard her talk about where they came from. But people like you who are interested and concerned, and you spent your time getting educated so you could go in that classroom and teach, get to the administrative level, take care of mental health needs. You know that children in general have a lot of issues. And to get to educate them means you got to get past the issues they bring from home, the bullying that they encounter with their peers, their own personal needs, their growth that brings on other kinds of stresses for them, the social media. You got to get past all of that to teach them. So you don't have time to be concerned about all this other foolishness the General Assembly is talking about. So that's a non-issue. So what we've done as Democrats is to say that's nonsense. It's a bunch of lies. I said that. My party didn't. I said it's a bunch of lies. It's nonsense. And we need to allow teachers and school personnel to educate our children and not to put all of these other issues on their backs. They don't have time for that. You do not have time for that. Based on what we've already talked about, we've got a lot of work to do. And so you don't need to hear the foolishness coming from the chamber of the General Assembly. And I hope that we put that to rest. I don't know, politics are strange, so whatever makes people get elected or get the majority is what they want to do. But hopefully in the next year, we put that to rest so we can focus and allow you to focus on mental health you mentioned. And we haven't funded mental health. We don't even have centers for youth in this state, mental health centers to take care of youth and their needs. And that's what we should be doing. So hopefully we can get around to those issues that will make a difference. And the issues in terms of children and their own families, they need help with their families. Families need help to support their kids.
Thank you.
I'll stop
So
there.
right. You are so right, Senator Robinson. There's so much for us to really focus on, and we appreciate you coming and chatting with us to talk about so many different topics. And you have an open invitation to come back on the program anytime you want to continue the dialogue.
Okay. Be glad to do that. You can tell I love talking about education. So much in my mind going on.
I like listening to you as well. I really do. We would like to thank our audience so very much for watching our program. We hope that you will engage us on our social media platforms. Please like our Facebook page. Please follow us on Twitter. Our handle is at Tar Heel Teachers. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Visit our website, tarheelteachers.com. And all of our social media platforms, please use our hashtag Tar Heel Teachers so we can find all of your great comments. We'd like to thank all of our wonderful group of co-hosts for joining us for this conversation. Amy Tart, Dr. Tempest Leake, Ashley Bandy, and Dr. Lionel Kato. We'd also like to thank our virtual audience so much for joining us, and we'd like to thank our special guest, once again, Senator Gladys Robinson from North Carolina Senate District 28. We look forward to seeing you next time on Tar Heel Teachers at Home, episode 125.